1,000 men stood against 4,000, and the fate of Makkah hung in the balance. How did a single decision in the Battle of Hunayn change the course of Islamic history forever? The year was 8 AH, and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, led an expedition from Madinah to the land of the Hawazin and Thaqif. This was not merely a military maneuver. It was a test of faith, a trial of leadership, and a moment that would define the future of the Muslim Ummah. The stakes were clear. If the Muslims failed, the enemy would regain their strength, threatening the fragile peace that had begun to take hold in Arabia. The Hawazin and Thaqif tribes, along with their allies, had gathered their forces near the valley of Hunayn. As Al-Tabari recorded in his Tarikh al-Rusul wa al-Muluk, the allied tribes numbered 4,000 fighters, a formidable force against the 1,000 Muslims who marched under the banner of Islam. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was aware of the strategic challenge. The terrain of Hunayn was treacherous, with narrow passes and dense vegetation. It was a perfect setting for an ambush. The Prophet, peace be upon him, chose to approach the valley with caution. He ordered his men to move stealthily, avoiding the main paths that could be easily defended. This tactical reasoning was rooted in his deep understanding of warfare and his reliance on divine guidance. But the first wave of the attack did not go as planned. The enemy, hidden in the dense foliage, launched a surprise assault. The Muslims, caught off guard, began to scatter. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was momentarily isolated from his companions. As Ibn al-Athir notes in Al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh, this moment of crisis tested the faith and resolve of the Muslim army. Yet the Prophet, peace be upon him, remained steadfast. He called out to his companions, reminding them of their duty to Allah. The turning point came when the Prophet, peace be upon him, rallied his men. He reminded them of their past victories, of the faith that had brought them together, and of the promise of Allah's support. The Muslims regrouped, their resolve strengthened by the words of their leader. They fought with renewed vigor, their faith unshaken. The Battle of Hunayn was not won by brute force alone. It was won by the unwavering faith of the Muslims, their trust in Allah, and their willingness to face adversity with courage. The Prophet, peace be upon him, demonstrated the essence of a Muslim hero, his Niyya, his taqwa, and his akhlaq. He led not just with military prowess, but with a deep sense of justice, mercy, and humility. As the dust settled, the Muslims emerged victorious. The enemy was defeated, and the path to Makkah was clear. But the battle was not just about conquest. It was about the spread of Islam, the establishment of justice, and the unity of the Ummah. The Prophet, peace be upon him, proved that true strength lies not in numbers, but in faith, unity, and unwavering trust in Allah. Yet the story did not end there. The victory at Hunayn was a prelude to greater challenges. The Prophet, peace be upon him, knew that the road ahead was long and arduous. The enemy, though defeated, was not vanquished. They would regroup, and new battles would ensue. The question remained, how would the Muslims face these new threats? What new trials awaited them on the path to establishing the dominion of Islam? In the year 628, a force of barely 1,400 Muslims faced an army of 10,000 Quraysh and their allies at the Battle of Khandak. Outnumbered more than 7-1, the Muslims had no choice but to rely on strategy and divine intervention. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, ordered the digging of a massive trench around Madinah, a tactic borrowed from the Roman and Byzantine empires. The Quraysh, despite their numerical advantage, were unable to breach the trench, and after weeks of stalemate, they withdrew in humiliation. But this was not the end of the struggle. The Quraysh, embittered and defiant, vowed to return stronger, and the Muslims knew that their victory was not yet secure. As Ibn al-Athir recorded in Al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, understood that the key to lasting peace lay not in mere military victories, but in the hearts and minds of the people. He sent out emissaries to neighboring tribes, calling them to Islam and forging alliances. Among these emissaries was Zayd ibn Haritha, a man whose loyalty and bravery had already earned him a place in history. Zayd, a former slave who had been freed and adopted by the Prophet, peace be upon him, was sent to the tribe of Banu Thalaba, a powerful confederation that had long been hostile to the Muslims. The stakes were high. The Banu Thalaba were a formidable force, and their alliance with the Quraysh had been a thorn in the side of the Muslim community. If Zayd could win them over, it would be a significant blow to the Quraysh and a major step towards securing the future of Islam. But the task was daunting. The Banu Thalaba were not known for their mercy, and their leaders were deeply entrenched in their opposition to the new faith. Zayd would have to rely on his wisdom, his eloquence, and his unwavering faith in Allah to succeed. Zayd's strategy was simple but profound. He would not come to them as a conqueror, but as a brother. He would not seek to impose his will, but to appeal to their sense of justice and honor. He would remind them of the common bonds that tied all Arabs together, and he would call them to the truth of Islam with patience and kindness. As Al-Tabari records in his Tarikh al-Rusul wa al-Muluk, Zayd arrived in the land of the Banu Thalaba with a small group of companions, their hearts filled with hope and their minds focused on the task at hand. The journey was long and arduous, taking them through harsh desert terrain and across treacherous mountains. But Zayd and his companions pressed on, their faith sustaining them through every hardship. When they finally reached the lands of the Banu Thalaba, they were met with suspicion and hostility. The tribe's leaders, wary of the Muslims and their growing power, were reluctant to listen to Zayd's message. But Zayd was undeterred. He knew that the path to peace was never easy, and he was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For days, Zayd and his companions engaged in debates and discussions with the leaders of the Banu Thalaba. They spoke of the unity of Allah, the finality of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the promise of a just and equitable society under Islam. Slowly but surely, their words began to find resonance among the tribe. Some were moved by the eloquence of Zayd's arguments, while others were impressed by the sincerity and humility of his companions. But the tribal leaders remained stubborn, and the future of the alliance hung in the balance. Then a turning point came. A young warrior from the Banu Thalaba, impressed by the wisdom and courage of Zayd and his companions, decided to embrace Islam. His conversion sparked a wave of interest among the tribe, and soon many others began to follow his example. The tribal leaders, seeing the tide of opinion turning against them, were forced to reconsider their position. They realized that resistance to Islam was not only futile, but also counter to their own interests. And so, after much deliberation, they agreed to accept the terms of alliance proposed by Zayd. The alliance with the Banu Thalaba was a turning point in the history of Islam. It marked the beginning of a new era of peace and prosperity for the Muslim community, and it laid the foundation for the rapid expansion of the faith in the years to come. Zayd ibn Haritha, through his wisdom, courage, and unwavering faith, had played a pivotal role in this historic achievement. His actions had not only secured the future of Islam, but had also demonstrated the power of diplomacy and the importance of forging alliances based on mutual respect and understanding. But the road ahead was still long and fraught with challenges, and the Muslims would need all their strength and resilience to face the trials that lay ahead. In the year 8 AH, with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, having just secured a decisive victory against the Hawazin and Thaqif at the Battle of Hunayn, the fledgling Muslim state faced a new challenge. The city of Taif, a stronghold of the Thaqif tribe, remained defiant. The Prophet, peace be upon him, dispatched an emissary to negotiate peace, but the emissary, a man named Safwan ibn Umayyah, was secretly working against the interests of the fledgling Muslim state. As Al-Tabari recorded in his Tarikh, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had sent Zayd ibn Haritha, his most trusted freed slave and a fierce warrior, to Taif to assess the situation. Zayd, known for his wisdom and strategic acumen, was to evaluate the strength of the Thaqif and determine the best course of action for the Muslims. According to Al-Tabari, Zayd was accompanied by a small contingent of 50 warriors, a force that was to blend stealth with strength. The stakes were clear. If the mission failed, the Muslims would face a prolonged and costly siege. The Thaqif were well fortified, and their alliance with the Quraysh of Mecca posed a significant threat. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had already demonstrated his unwavering commitment to the cause of Islam, and the failure of this mission would not only delay the spread of the faith, but also embolden the disbelievers. Zayd ibn Haritha, understanding the gravity of the situation, devised a plan that would allow him to gather crucial information without engaging in open conflict. As Ibn al-Athir notes in Al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh, Zayd sent scouts to infiltrate Taif, using the cover of darkness to gather intelligence on the city's defenses and the number of its inhabitants. The scouts reported back that the Thaqif had amassed a force of 5,000 men, a formidable number that far exceeded the small contingent Zayd had at his disposal. The city walls were high, and the gates were heavily guarded, making a direct assault a near impossible task. According to Al-Tabari, Zayd paused. He knew that a frontal assault would result in heavy casualties and would likely fail. Instead, he decided to use the element of surprise and the tactical advantage of the mountainous terrain surrounding Taif. He ordered his men to prepare for a nighttime raid, aiming to create confusion and sow discord among the Thaqif defenders. The night of the raid, Zayd and his men scaled the rocky cliffs surrounding Taif, using the cover of darkness to approach the city walls. As Ibn al-Athir recorded, they set fire to the gates and the surrounding wooden structures, creating chaos and panic among the Thaqif. The defenders, caught off guard, scrambled to put out the fires and repel the attackers. In the confusion, Zayd and his men managed to breach the city walls and engage the Thaqif in close combat. However, the mission was not without its setbacks. As Al-Tabari reports, the Thaqif, despite their initial disarray, quickly regrouped and launched a counterattack. Zayd and his men found themselves outnumbered and surrounded. Zayd, ever the tactician, ordered a strategic retreat, knowing that the safety of his men was paramount. They withdrew back to the safety of the mountains, having achieved their objective of assessing the Thaqif's strength and capabilities. But the letter that arrived that night would change everything. The letter, sent by Safwan ibn Umayyah, revealed his betrayal. He had been in secret communication with the Quraysh of Mecca, plotting to undermine the Muslim state. The revelation of Safwan's treachery sent shockwaves through the Muslim community as they realized the extent of the threat they faced. With 7,000 men at his command, Zayd ibn Haritha faced a city that housed 300,000 dinars in treasure. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had tasked him with an extraordinary mission: seize the wealth of the Byzantines from their heavily fortified city of Dumat al-Jandal. The stakes were high. Failure meant not only the loss of a vast fortune that could strengthen the Muslim community, but also the prestige of the new faith. The Byzantines, a superpower of the time, had long dominated the region, and a defeat at their hands could deter others from embracing Islam. As Ibn al-Athir recorded in Al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh, the Prophet, peace be upon him, had placed immense trust in Zayd, saying, "He is a trustworthy leader who will not betray the trust placed in him." Zayd's strategic challenge was immense. Dumat al-Jandal was a fortified city, its walls strong and its defenses formidable. The city was situated in a region known for its harsh terrain, making a direct assault risky. Zayd, known for his wisdom and tactical acumen, chose a strategy of deception and swift action. As Al-Tabari reported in his Tarikh al-Rusul wa al-Muluk, Zayd gathered intelligence on the city's layout and the habits of its garrison. He learned that the city's defenders were confident in their strength and had grown complacent, believing that no force would dare attack such a well-fortified position. However, the road to victory was not without its difficulties. According to Ibn Kathir in Al-Bidaya wa al-Nihaya, Zayd's scouts reported that the Byzantines had received reinforcements, swelling their numbers to 10,000. This new information forced Zayd to recalculate his plans. A direct assault would now be even more perilous. Zayd paused, considering his options. He knew that the element of surprise was crucial. If the Byzantines were alerted to his presence, they could prepare for a prolonged siege, making the capture of the treasure nearly impossible. Zayd's solution was a masterstroke of military strategy. He decided to divide his forces, sending a smaller group to create a diversion at the city's gates, while the main army scaled the walls under the cover of darkness. As Ibn al-Athir noted, this tactic exploited the Byzantines' overconfidence and their lack of preparedness for a night assault. The diversionary force engaged the city's guards, drawing their attention away from the main assault. Meanwhile, Zayd led his men up the city walls, using ropes and ladders to scale the fortifications. The Byzantines were caught off guard. The sudden appearance of Muslim warriors on their walls sent waves of panic through their ranks. The defenders, unprepared for such a bold maneuver, were quickly overwhelmed. Zayd's forces secured the walls and opened the gates, allowing the remainder of his army to pour into the city. The battle was swift and decisive, with the Byzantines suffering heavy losses. The city's treasury, filled with 300,000 dinars, was seized, and the wealth was sent back to Medina, strengthening the Muslim community and demonstrating the power of their faith. But the victory at Dumat al-Jandal was not the end of Zayd's mission. As the dust settled and the spoils were counted, word reached him of a new threat. The Byzantines, humiliated by their defeat, were rallying their forces for a counterattack. Zayd knew that his work was far from over. The road ahead was uncertain, but his faith in Allah and his commitment to the cause of Islam remained unwavering. In the year 634 AD, with only 9,000 men against a Byzantine force swollen to 40,000, Khalid ibn al-Walid stood on the precipice of annihilation. The Byzantine Empire, the superpower of the ancient world, had rallied its forces in the fertile lands of Syria, determined to crush the rising tide of Islam. The stakes could not have been higher. If Khalid failed, the Muslim conquest of Syria would be snuffed out before it truly began. The very survival of the fledgling Islamic State hung in the balance. Khalid knew the Byzantine army was formidable. They had been trained for centuries, their ranks filled with seasoned veterans of countless battles. Their commander, a Roman general named Theodore, was no novice. He had chosen the plains of Ajnadain, a region of open fields and rolling hills near Bethlehem, as the perfect battleground for his superior numbers. The Byzantine cavalry, clad in heavy armor, could charge with devastating force, while their archers could rain down death from a distance. Khalid's forces, though fewer, were a mix of seasoned warriors and recent converts, their hearts ablaze with faith, but their numbers woefully insufficient. Khalid's strategic mind raced. He knew he could not meet the Byzantines in a conventional battle. His only hope was to outmaneuver them, to use the terrain and his knowledge of desert warfare to his advantage. He divided his army into 3 parts, sending one under the command of Amr ibn al-As to scout the Byzantine flanks, and another under Zayd ibn Haritha to probe their defenses. Khalid himself would lead the main force, hiding in the rugged hills until the right moment struck. As Ibn al-Athir recorded in his Al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh, Khalid's scouts brought word of the Byzantine positions. The enemy was confident, spreading their forces across the plain in a grand display of strength. Theodore had placed his elite cavalry in the center, flanked by infantry and archers. He expected a frontal assault and had prepared accordingly. Khalid, however, had no intention of giving him one. The night before the battle, Khalid gathered his commanders. "We cannot win by force alone," he said, his voice steady and calm. "The Byzantines outnumber us 3-1. But they are used to fighting in open fields, not in the shadows of the hills. We will use the darkness to our advantage." His plan was simple: strike at dawn when the Byzantine forces were still stirring from their tents. Zayd ibn Haritha and his men would feign an attack on the Byzantine left flank, drawing their attention and forces away from the center. Amr ibn al-As would then attack from the rear, cutting off any hope of retreat. Khalid's main force would charge straight into the heart of the Byzantine formation, seeking out Theodore himself. But doubts crept in. According to Al-Tabari, Khalid paused as the scouts reported the Byzantine numbers. The sheer scale of the enemy forces was daunting. What if the plan failed? What if the Byzantines saw through the deception? The weight of command pressed heavily on his shoulders. Yet Khalid's faith never wavered. He turned to his men, their faces etched with determination, and saw the same conviction that burned in his own heart. "Allah is with us," he said. "And with Allah no force is too great." At dawn, the battle began. Zayd ibn Haritha led his men in a fierce assault on the Byzantine left, their swords flashing in the morning light. The Byzantines, taken by surprise, rushed to meet the attack, their ranks shifting to counter the threat. Amr ibn al-As, unseen in the darkness, carefully maneuvered his forces into position behind the Byzantine lines. As the enemy's attention was diverted, Khalid's main force erupted from the hills, a tidal wave of Muslim warriors crashing into the heart of the Byzantine formation. The battle raged. The Byzantines, though caught off guard, fought with the desperation of men who knew defeat meant death. Their cavalry, though powerful, found themselves trapped in the chaos of the shifting battlefield. Khalid's tactics had turned the tables, and the Byzantines, once confident, now faltered. Theodore, realizing the gravity of the situation, attempted to rally his men, but it was too late. Amr ibn al-Az's forces struck from the rear, cutting off any hope of retreat. The Byzantine army, surrounded and outmaneuvered, began to collapse. The victory was decisive. The Byzantines, their pride shattered, fled the field, leaving behind a trail of discarded armor and broken spirits. Khalid's forces, though weary, stood victorious. The Battle of Ajnidain had been won, and with it, the path to Syria lay open. The Byzantine Empire, the once unassailable giant of the ancient world, had tasted defeat at the hands of the Muslims. But the victory was not without cost. Khalid, surveying the battlefield, saw the toll of war. The Muslim forces had suffered losses, and the road ahead was still long. The Byzantines, though defeated, would not give up so easily. Reinforcements would come, and the war would continue. As the sun set over the battlefield, Khalid turned to his men, their faces worn but their spirits unbroken. "This is but the beginning," he said. "Allah has granted us victory today, but the fight is far from over." In the year 12 of the Hijri calendar, a mere 12,000 Muslim warriors stood before the might of the Persian Empire, their numbers swelling to an estimated 40,000 defenders. The city of Al-Madarin, with its towering walls and strategic importance, was the next target in the Islamic conquests, but the challenge ahead was monumental. As Ibn al-Athir recorded in Al-Kamil fi al-Tarikh, the Persians had fortified their cities, learned from past defeats, and were determined to repel the Muslim forces. The stakes could not have been higher. A failure at Al-Madarin would not only halt the expansion of the Islamic State, but could also embolden other empires, like the Byzantines, to launch counterattacks. The very stability of the newly established Islamic rule was at risk. The Muslims had to succeed, not just for territorial gain, but to uphold the honor of their faith and the unity of their fledgling nation. The city of Al-Madarin, located along the Tigris River, was a critical stronghold of the Persian Empire. Its walls were formidable, and its defenders were well prepared. The Muslim commander, Zayd ibn Abi Waqqas, had to devise a strategy that would overcome these formidable defenses. According to Al-Tabari in al-Tarikh, al-Rusul al-Muluk, Zayd chose a policy of attrition, laying siege to the city and cutting off its supplies. This approach was not without risk, as prolonged sieges could drain resources and morale. However, Zayd's reasoning was sound. The Persians, confident in their fortifications, would eventually be forced to engage in battle or starve. For weeks, the Muslims dug trenches and erected defensive works, cutting off all routes into and out of the city. The Persians, under the command of General Bahman Jadhai, watched from behind their walls, confident that their supplies would hold out. As Ibn Kathir notes in Al-Bidaya al-Nihaya, the Persians had amassed a vast stockpile of food and weapons, believing they could outlast the Muslims. The siege dragged on, and the Muslim forces began to feel the strain. Supplies were running low, and the heat of the summer sun made conditions unbearable. Then a setback struck. A detachment of Persian cavalry, led by a cunning commander, managed to break through the Muslim lines and raid their supply trains. The Muslims lost valuable provisions, and morale began to waver. According to Al-Tabari, Zayd ibn Abi Waqqas gathered his commanders to reassess their strategy. The weight of the decision was immense. Should they press on, risking further losses, or retreat and preserve their strength for another day? Zayd, known for his wisdom and piety, turned to prayer. He sought guidance from Allah, recalling the words of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, "Consult with others, and you will not regret." Zayd consulted with his commanders, including Zayd ibn Haritha, who had proven his strategic brilliance time and again. Zayd advised persistence, arguing that the Persians, too, were suffering from the prolonged siege. Their morale was likely as low as the Muslims, and a final, decisive push could break their resolve. Reinvigorated by this counsel, Zayd ordered his forces to prepare for a massive assault. The Muslims, despite their fatigue, rallied behind their leaders. On the chosen day, they advanced on the city walls, scaling them with ladders and battering rams. The Persians, taken by surprise at the sudden ferocity of the attack, fought desperately but were overwhelmed. The walls of Al-Madarin, once thought impregnable, crumbled under the onslaught. The city fell, and with it, the heart of the Persian defenses in the region. The Muslims had triumphed, but their victory was not without cost. Many brave warriors had fallen, their names etched in the annals of Islamic history. Among them was Zayd ibn Haritha, whose leadership and courage had been instrumental in the success of the siege. His legacy lived on, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the early Muslims. Yet, even as the dust settled over Al-Madarin, new challenges loomed on the horizon. The Persian Empire, though weakened, was not yet broken. Reports reached the Muslim commanders of a new Persian army gathering in the east, determined to avenge their defeat. The Muslims had won a great battle, but the war was far from over.